I went to the Michael Wesch lecture that happened today, Thursday, and a lot of the material that he presented was very similar to the material that was presented in the lecture that we watched for Monday's class, but it had a kind of a different slant, looking at it from a different angle and seeing what it really means in terms of how we educate and how we have a setup of education. He first presented on the idea of lecture halls and what they mean, in that information is scarce and we all have to come together into these places in order to get information, and we have to trust these authorities and only authorized information is beyond discussion, such that everything is pointed in one direction, looking at the expert who knows everything about this topic, and it's not really no discussion is allowed. And he talked about this revolution that I hadn't really known about. I didn't know anything about before this lecture, how there was this revolution before the Vietnam War, trying to get people to think differently about education and how we educate. And I guess the Montessori schools kind of developed out of that, where education is kind of driven by the individual as opposed to driven by the educator. And so that's kind of an interesting idea. He talked about how the Vietnam War is and stagnation from the economy and these utopian ideals and the ideas of back to basics kind of stifled that revolution. And he had these three critiques that the back to basics ideas put onto these new kind of way of educating, and his critiques were that one is that it panders to students, two that it doesn't really teach the basics, and three that it's just too difficult to implement. And then he turned around and said the exact same used the exact same arguments against the back to basics movement, which was kind of cute but really not very effective. I think that the fact is these new using new technologies and new ways of teaching really are pandering to students, but that's not a bad thing necessarily. We know these technologies and can use them, and being able to utilize them in order to increase knowledge is something that's really good, I think. And he talked about how basics are really not basics anymore. Like we need to know about computers, because we can't go through life not knowing about computers in this day and age. And so really this social media and stuff and things are part of basics, and then too difficult to implement. This is definitely true that technology is expensive, and really implementing new technologies for mass education is really not very effective.